Please subscribe to my channel. This is my sincere request to you. The snow outside the lodge was blinding, yet the banquet hall felt colder. My brother dragged me forward, smirking as he introduced me to his boss as our family's failure. My parents nodded, but his boss did not smile. He stared at me and whispered a single sentence that froze my brother's grin. By morning, a black car arrived at my office carrying an old file and a heavy debt my family never knew they were about to pay. My name is Harper Rodriguez. If 38 years of life on the periphery of the Whitman family had taught me anything, it was that humiliation was a dish best served with vintage champagne and a captive audience. The air inside the Snow Blast Lodge was not just warm. It was stifling, heavy with the scent of expensive lees, roasted prime rib, and the specific cloying perfume of old money trying to look new. Outside, the Idaho winter was doing its worst. Sun Valley was buried under 2 feet of fresh powder, and the wind off the mountains was enough to freeze the breath in your lungs. But inside, under the amber glow of chandeliers that probably cost more than my first car, the temperature was rising. I stood near a pillar wrapped in fairy lights, nursing a glass of sparkling water I had no intention of finishing. I was wearing a black dress. Simple, tailored, and entirely forgettable. That was the point. In my line of work, you do not want to be remembered for your outfit. I am an independent, financial restructuring consultant. That is the polite term. In reality, I am the person small business owners call when they are 3 months away from bankruptcy and need someone to cut the rot out of their ledgers with a scalpel. I deal in hard truths and red ink. I am good at it because I do not let emotion cloud the arithmetic. But here at my brother's engagement party, I was not the expert. I was the prop. Grant Whitman was 33 years old, 5 years my junior, and he moved through the room with the frantic, high-gloss energy of a man who knows he's the center of the universe. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him a little too perfectly, the kind of tailoring that suggested vanity rather than class. Grant was a manager at Blue Crest Transport and Fulfillment. To hear my parents tell it, he practically ran the logistics for the entire Pacific Northwest. To anyone who actually looked at the org chart, he was a mid-level functionary with a talent for taking credit and a terrifying lack of attention to detail. I watched him across the room. He was laughing too loudly at a joke made by a man in a gray suit. His fiancée, Mallory Keene, stood beside him. Mallory was 26, radiant, and looked at Grant with an adoration that made my chest ache with a dull phantom pain. She did not know. She did not know about the maxed-out credit cards, the corners he cut, or the way he rewrote history to make himself the hero of every story. I checked my watch. It was 8:45 in the evening. I calculated I could slip out the side door in 15 minutes without causing a scene. I was Ron Harper. Grant's voice cut through the low hum of conversation like a dropped glass. He waved me over, his smile tight and predatory. I hesitated, but my mother, Colleen, was standing 3 feet away, talking to a cousin. She turned, her eyes narrowing slightly. The message was clear. Do not embarrass us. Bow to your brother. I set my glass on a passing tray and walked toward him. The carpet was plush enough to swallow the sound of my heels. As I approached, I saw who Grant was talking to. The man in the gray suit was Harlan Voss. I knew the face, of course. I had researched Blue Crest before coming here, a habit of my profession. Harlan Voss was 59, the CEO and founder of the company. He was a legend in logistics, a man who had started with 1 truck and built an empire. In person, he was intimidating. He stood perfectly still, holding the scotch. He wasn't drinking, observing the party with the detached scrutiny of a hawk watching field mice. He did not look like he was having fun. He looked like he was working. Grant reached out and grabbed my arm. His grip was firm, possessive, the way a child grabs a toy they are about to break. He pulled me into the small circle of space that power creates around itself. "Mr. Voss," Grant said, his voice dropping an octave, trying for a tone of intimate camaraderie that he had not earned. "I want you to meet someone. This is my sister, Harper." Harlan Voss shifted his gaze. He looked at me. His eyes were a pale icy blue, surrounded by a web of wrinkles that spoke of long nights and hard decisions. He did not smile. He just assessed. "Harper Rodriguez," I said, extending my hand. "It is a pleasure, Mr. Boss." He took my hand. His grip was dry and brief. "Rodriguez?" he asked, his voice a low gravel. "Not Whitman." "I kept my married name," I said simply. "Even after the divorce, she is a bit of a distinctive spirit." "My father," Richard chimed in, suddenly appearing at my elbow. He was holding a glass of red wine, his face flushed with the pride of the evening. "Always has been." Grant laughed, a sharp barking sound. He clapped a hand on my shoulder, heavy and patronizing. "What Dad means to say, sir, is that Harper here is the caution to my tale. I'm the one who followed the rules, climbed the ladder at Blue Crest Harper." He paused for effect, looking around to ensure he had an audience. A few nearby guests, friends of the family, turned to listen. "Well, let's just say she is our family's failure." The silence that followed was absolute. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the sudden vacuum-sealed quiet of a room where the oxygen has been sucked out. I felt the blood drain from my face, not from shame, but from a cold, familiar exhaustion. This was the dynamic. This had always been the dynamic. Grant, the golden sun. Harper, the dark shadow cast behind him to make him shine brighter. My mother laughed, a tinkling, brittle sound. "Oh, Grant, don't be so dramatic," she said, though her eyes were hard on mine. "Harper just chooses a different path. She has never really cared for the standards we value. Avia, dear, success looks different to everyone." "Exactly," my father agreed, taking a sip of his wine. He smiled at Mr. Us, a conspiratorial look that said, "You know how it is with wayward children. We love her anyway, of course, even if she is scraping by." I stood there, frozen. I was 38 years old. I owned my own home. I had saved 3 manufacturing plants in Boise from liquidation in the last 2 years alone. My bank account was healthier than my parents' and Grant's combined. But in this room, under these lights, none of that mattered. I was just Harper, the failure, the divorcee, the disappointment. I looked at Grant. He was beaming at his boss, waiting for the validation. He expected Harlan Voss to chuckle, to clap him on the back, to bond over the shared burden of disappointing relatives. But Harlan Voss did not laugh. He did not even blink. He was staring at me. His gaze had intensified, losing its detached quality. He was looking at my face, then down at my hands, and then back at my eyes. It was a look of recognition, but not the casual kind. It was the look of a man trying to solve a puzzle he thought he had finished years ago. He was tilting his head slightly, as if listening to a frequency only he could hear. "Failure," Harlan repeated softly. The word sounded heavy in his mouth. Grant's smile faltered. "Just a fraction. Just a joke, sir. You know, sibling rivalry." Harlan turned his head slowly to look at Grant. The movement was mechanical, terrifyingly precise. The warmth had vanished from the older man's face, replaced by a blank, terrifying neutrality. "You call her a failure?" Harlan said. It was not a question. "Well, I mean," Grant stammered, his confidence evaporating like mist. "She works out of a small office downtown. No big corporate title, just hustling. You know how it is." Perrin looked back at me. "Harper Rodriguez," he said again. He said it like he was testing the weight of the syllables. Then he did something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He stepped closer to me, ignoring my brother entirely. "Independent restructuring," he murmured. "Boise 1999. No 2010, the distribution, audit." I blinked, surprised. "I beg your pardon." Harlan shook his head slightly, as if clearing a thought. He looked at me with a profound, unreadable intensity. Then he turned back to my brother. The atmosphere in the circle shifted violently. My father lowered his wine glass. My mother stopped smiling. Mallory, who had been clinging to Grant's arm, took a half step back, sensing the change in barometric pressure. "Grant," Harlan said. His voice was soft, barely above a whisper, but in the silence of our circle it sounded like a thunderclap. "Yes, sir?" Grant asked. He was sweating now. A bead of perspiration tracked its way down his temple. "Tomorrow morning," Harlan said. 8:00. "Sir, I want you to be in my office at 8:00. Harlan continued. his voice devoid of any emotion. "And I want you to bring the physical files for the event reimbursement. Everything you submitted for this party, the venue, the catering, the band." Grant's face went gray. The digital copies are all in the system, sir." Approvals are. "I did not ask for digital copies." Harlan interrupted. He did not raise his voice. He did not have to. "I want the physical contracts, the vendor agreements, the original invoices, and the complete audit trail for the vendor onboarding you approved last month." My brother looked like he had been punched in the gut. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The mention of vendor onboarding seemed to hit him harder than the rest. "All of it," Harlan said, "on my desk. Do not be late." Harlan Voss looked at me one last time. There was no pity in his eyes. There was something else, respect perhaps, or maybe curiosity. He gave me a single sharp nod, acknowledging me as an equal, before turning on his heel and walking away. He left a crater of silence behind him. The music from the string quartet seemed to rush back into the void, shrill and mocking. My mother was the first to speak. "Well," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That was odd. Why would he want to work on a Saturday?" My father frowned, looking at Grant. "Grant, is everything all right?" That sounded serious. Grant was staring at the space where his boss had been. The arrogance was gone, stripped away to reveal the terrified boy underneath. He looked sick. "It is fine," he croaked. "Just standard compliance." He is a stickler. "It is nothing." But his hands were shaking. I looked at Mallory. She was staring at Grant, her eyes wide. She looked from him to me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of doubt in her gaze. She looked down at the diamond ring on her finger, then back at her fiancé, who was currently hyperventilating in a $5,000 tuxedo. "I am going to head out," I said. My voice sounded remarkably steady, even to my own ears. "Harper, wait." My mother snapped, turning her anxiety onto her usual target. "You upset him. I did not know what you did. Standing there, looking like a funeral director. But you upset Mr. Us." "I did not say a word, mother," I replied. "You never do," she hissed. "That is the problem. You just stand there and make everyone uncomfortable." I looked at them, my family, the people who had taken my college fund to pay for Grant's first car because he needed the mobility for his internships, the people who told me to stop talking about money because it was unbecoming while secretly asking me to co-sign loans they never intended to pay off themselves. "Good night, Richard. Good night, Colleen." I said I did not call them mom and dad. I had stopped doing that years ago. I turned to Grant. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his phone, his thumbs flying across the screen, likely trying to delete evidence that couldn't be deleted. "Congratulations on the engagement, Grant," I said softly. He didn't answer. I walked away. I walked through the crowd of laughing, drinking people, past the ice sculpture of a swan that was slowly melting into a puddle, and out the heavy oak doors. The cold hit me like a physical blow. The temperature had dropped. It was probably 10 below zero with the wind chill. The snow was coming down harder now, white flakes swirling in the beams of the valet stand lights. I handed my ticket to the valet. He was a young kid shivering in his jacket. I pressed a $20 bill into his hand. "Stay warm," I said. When my Subaru pulled up a practical car, 5 years old, paid for in cash, I climbed inside and locked the door. The silence of the car was a sanctuary. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather biting into my cold palms. I sat there for a moment, watching the snow pile up on the windshield before I turned on the wipers. My heart was hammering against my ribs, not because of the insult. I was used to the insults. I had built a callus over that part of my soul a long time ago. No, my heart was racing because of what Harlan Voss had said. The distribution, audit 2010. Why did the CEO of a billion-dollar logistics company look at a nobody consultant and see a ghost from 14 years ago? And why, when he looked at my brother, his golden boy manager, did he suddenly decide to pull the financial equivalent of a murder weapon out of the holster? Grant was in trouble. That was obvious. The panic in his eyes when Voss mentioned vendor onboarding was the panic of a man who knows he has been caught with his hand in the cookie jar. but that wasn't what kept my hands tight on the wheel as I navigated the treacherous, icy road leading away from the lodge. It was the way Harlan Voss had looked at me. He hadn't looked at me like I was a failure. He had looked at me like I was the only person in the room who actually mattered. And for the first time in my life, that terrified me more than being invisible. I drove into the dark, the snow swirling in my headlights like static, leaving the warmth and the lies of the Snow Blast Lodge behind. But I have feeling, a sinking heavy feeling in my gut that the cold was just beginning, and whatever Grant had done, whatever debt he had accrued in his arrogance, the bill was coming due, and somehow my name was on the invoice. The drive back to Ketchum had been a blur of white lines and falling snow, a hypnotic tunnel that usually helped me decompress. But tonight, the silence of my small house offered no comfort. It was 3:00 in the morning. My kitchen was dark, save for the blue light of the digital clock on the microwave. I sat at the small breakfast island, my hands wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone stone cold an hour ago. I did not drink it. I just stared at the black surface of the liquid, seeing my own reflection distorted in the ceramic loam. Why did I take it? That was the question that had been eating at the lining of my stomach since I walked out of the Snow Glass Lodge. It was not a new question. It was a question as old as my adolescence, a constant background radiation to my life as a Whitman. Why did I stand there motionless and mute while my brother introduced me as a failure? Why did I let my mother make excuses for my existence? Why did I let my father look at me with that distinct mixture of pity and disappointment? I knew the answer. Of course, it was conditioning. It was the muscle, memory of a lifetime spent keeping the peace. If I stayed quiet, the moment passed. If I fought back, I became the problem. I became the difficult one, the hysterical one, the one who could not just let things be happy. So I swallowed the humiliation. I metabolized it like a poison I had built up an immunity to, letting it settle in my bones so the rest of them could pretend we were a normal functioning family. But tonight felt different. Harlan Voss had disrupted the formula. He had refused to play his part in the script, and in doing so, he had shattered the lens through which I viewed my role. I stood up and poured the cold coffee down the sink. The drain burgled, a harsh sound in the quiet house. I walked into my living room. It was not a palace. It was a modest two-bedroom A-frame on the edge of town, tucked into a grove of aspen trees. But it was mine. I paid the mortgage. I paid for the renovation of the master bath. I paid for the high-speed fiber optic internet that allowed me to run a consultancy firm that had saved 6 local businesses from insolvency in the last fiscal year alone. Failure. The word tasted like ash. My eyes drifted to my laptop bag. Sitting on the armchair where I had tossed it before leaving for the party, I felt a sudden sharp spike of anger. It was not the hot explosive anger of a tantrum. It was the cold clarifying anger of a realization. I walked over, unzipped the bag, and pulled out my laptop. 3 months ago, Grant had called me. He did not call to ask how I was. He never did. He called because he was drowning, though he framed it as him doing me a favor. I have these vendor contracts for the engagement party, he had said, his voice breezy, masking the panic underneath. I am swamped with the merger at work. I figured you might want to feel involved. Look them over for me. Just a quick sanity check. It was classic Grant. He made his incompetence sound like an act of charity toward me. He was letting me help. I should have said no. I should have told him my hourly rate was $350 and I was fully booked. But I didn't. I said yes. I said yes because I wanted the party to be nice. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted stupidly for my parents to say thank you, Harper. When I opened the files he sent that night, I was appalled. The contracts were a disaster. The venue agreement had force majeure clause that was so broad the lodge could have on the day of the event because of a cloudy sky, and kept the entire deposit. The catering contract had hidden service fees that compounded on top of the gratuity. I spent 4 nights rewriting them. I negotiated with the lodge manager, a woman who terrified Grant, but respected me because I spoke her language of liability and risk. I saved Grant nearly $12,000 in potential overages and penalty fees. I smoothed out the timeline. I ensured the band had the correct power supply requirements written into the rider so they wouldn't walk out during sound check. I handed Grant a bulletproof event plan. And how did he thank me? He didn't. He told our parents that he had really hammered the vendors and got a great deal. My father had clapped him on the back and said he had the killer instinct of a CEO. I sat down on my sofa and booted up the laptop. The screen glowed, illuminating the dark room. It got worse than just the contracts. 6 weeks ago, on a Tuesday morning, my phone had rung while I was in the middle of a client meeting. It was Grant. He was whispering, "Harper, I messed up." He had said he had forgotten to pay the initial deposits. The deadlines had passed 48 hours prior. The photographer, a high-end artist from Seattle who was Mallory's dream choice, was about to release the date to another couple. The band was threatening to pull out. "I need to wire the money now," Grant had pleaded, "but my liquidity is tied up in some short-term investments. The transfer won't clear for 3 days. Harper, please. Mallory will kill me. Mom will kill me." He needed money immediately. "How much?" I had asked, stepping out of my meeting. $9,200 for the photographer, he said, and $7,400 for the band. $16,600. It was not a small amount. It was a significant chunk of the retainer fee I had just received from a manufacturing client the day before. That money was earmarked for my quarterly tax payments and my own business insurance premiums. "I will pay you back on Friday." Grant had sworn, "As soon as my transfer clears, I promise on my life." "Harper, I wired the money." I sent $16,600 of my own hard-earned cash to 2 strangers so my brother wouldn't look like a fool in front of his fiancée. Friday came and went. No wire. When I asked him about it the following week, he laughed it off. "Oh, right. The bank is being a pain with the verification. Give it a few days." A month passed. I asked again. He got defensive. "Why are you so obsessed with money, Harper? I am good for it. You know I'm good for it. Do not be so petty. I have a lot of expenses right now with the wedding." Petty. I was petty for wanting my $16,600 back. Meanwhile, at the family dinner 2 weeks ago, my mother had gushed about how generous Grant was. "This party is going to be so lavish," she had said, beaming at him. "You are spending a fortune on us, Grant. We are so proud of how well you are doing." Grant had just smiled and taken another bite of his steak. He was paying for the party with my money. He was buying our parents' admiration with my labor in my bank account. I typed my password into the laptop with aggressive strokes. This pattern wasn't new. It started the year I turned 19. My grandfather, Walter, had left a college fund for all the grandchildren. It was a trust meant to be split evenly. When I was accepted to the state university, I went to my father to ask about accessing my share for tuition. I remembered the scene perfectly. My father sitting at the kitchen table, refusing to meet my eyes. We had to make an adjustment. Harper, he had said, they had liquidated the entire fund, all of it. They had used it to pay for Grant's private university tuition and his living expenses in a luxury apartment because Grant needs the right environment to thrive. "You are resilient, Harper," my mother had added as if it were a compliment. "You know how to work hard. You can get loans. You can work nights. Granty is different. He needs a leg up. He's going to do big things and we need to invest in that potential." So I took the loans. I worked 2 jobs, one at a library, one waiting tables while taking a full course load. I graduated with honors and $40,000 in debt. Grant graduated with a C average and a sports car. I paid off my loans 3 years ago. I did it quietly, dollar by dollar. I built my business from a card table in a studio apartment. I was not a failure. I was the only one in the family who actually understood the value of a dollar because I was the only one who had never been given one. I realized sitting there in the dark that I had spent my entire life protecting the very people who refused to protect me. I was their safety net, invisible and unappreciated, catching them every time they fell so they never had to feel the impact of the ground. "No more," I whispered to the empty room. I navigated to the folder labeled Whitman Keene Wedding. Harlan Boss's words echoed in my mind. Bring the physical files, the vendor agreements. Why was he so specific? Why did he care about the vendors? Grant worked in logistics. He wasn't embezzling from the company to pay for the wedding, was he? I opened the spreadsheet I had created to track the payments I had made. There they were. The wire transfer to the photographer. The wire transfer to the band. Wait, I frowned, leaning closer to the screen. When I had wired the money for the band, Grant had sent me a specific routing instruction. He told me the band had a new business manager and the payment needed to go to a specific LLC to ensure the date was locked. I hadn't questioned it at the time because I was in a rush and he was panicking. I pulled up the digital receipt of the wire transfer beneficiary Keen Event Logistics, LLC. I froze. Keen. Mallory's last name was Keen. I opened a new tab and went to the Secretary of State's business search portal. My fingers flew across the keys. I typed in Keen Event Logistics, LLC. The search result popped up instantly. Entity name Keen Event Logistics, LLC. Date information. September 14th of this year. Registered agent Mallory Keen. Mailing address, a post office box in Twin Falls. I stared at the date. September 14th. That was exactly 2 days before Grant called me in a panic, begging for the $7,400 for the band deposit. My heart began to pound a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. I went back to the contract file Grant had sent me for the band. It was a standard PDF. I had reviewed the terms, fixed the writer, and sent it back. But I hadn't looked closely at the payment page because Grant had said he would handle the final signature. I opened the metadata of the PDF file. Author Grant Whitman, last modified by Grant Whitman. I switched back to the photographer's contract. I looked at the wire instruction he had given me for that one. Beneficiary Keen Event Logistics, LLC. The photographer wasn't paid. The band wasn't paid. I had sent $16,600 to a shell company set up by Grant and his fiancée. I felt a wave of Norser. It wasn't just that he had stolen from me. It was the elaborate nature of the lie. He had created a crisis, manipulated my desire to help, and funneled my own money into an account he controlled, all while letting me believe I was saving his wedding day. And if he was doing this to me, what was he doing to Blue Crest? Harlan Voss knew, or he suspected. That was why he wanted the files. That was why he wanted the audit trail. I sat back, the cold light of the screen washing over my face. The pieces were clicking into place, not with a satisfying snap, but with the sickening crunch of bones breaking. My brother wasn't just a narcissist. He was a fraud. And I, the family failure, was the only one holding the receipt. I closed the laptop, but I did not turn it off. I needed to sleep, but I knew I wouldn't. The sun would be up in 3 hours. Harlan Voss expected Grant in his office at 8:00. I looked out the window at the snow piling up against the glass. It looked pure and clean, hiding the dirt of the road underneath, but the snow would melt. It always did. And when it did, everything that had been buried would be exposed to the light. I wasn't going to protect him this time. I wasn't going to fix the contracts. I wasn't going to wire the money. For the first time in 38 years, I was going to let Grant Whitman fall. Tuesday morning arrived with the flat gray light, typical of an Idaho winter, the kind that made the world look like it had been sketched in charcoal. I was in my office by 7:30. My workspace was not in a glass tower like Blue Crest. It was a converted brick storefront in downtown Boise, sandwiched between a bakery and a notary public. It was small, unassuming, and meticulously organized, just the way I liked it. I was 3 hours into analyzing a cash flow statement for a struggling hardware chain when the light in my front room changed. A vehicle had pulled up to the curb, blocking the morning sun. It was not a delivery truck. It was a black SUV, massive and gleaming, idling with the quiet, menacing hum of an expensive engine. The windows were tinted so dark they looked like inked in a neighborhood of dusty sedans and pickup trucks. It looked like a shark swimming in a koi pond. I watched through the blinds as the driver's door opened. A man in a dark suit got out, walked around the back, and opened the rear passenger door. Harlan Voss stepped out. He was wearing a camel hair coat over a charcoal suit, and he looked out of place against the cracked sidewalk and the fading mural on the bakery wall next door. He did not look around to admire the scenery. He looked straight at my door. My stomach gave a single hard lurch, but I forced my hands to remain steady as I saved my spreadsheet. I stood up, smoothed the front of my blazer, and walked out from behind my desk just as the bell above the door chimed. Harlan entered alone. The driver stayed by the car. "Mr. Voss," I said. My voice was calm, projecting a neutrality I did not feel. "This is unexpected." He did not answer immediately. He closed the door behind him, shutting out the noise of the street. He stood in the center of my small reception area, his presence making the room feel suddenly cramped. He took off his leather gloves, tucking them into his pocket, and began to look around. He was not looking with judgment, but with an auditor's eye. He scanned the clean lines of the waiting chairs, the lack of clutter on the surfaces, the single potted fern that was thriving in the corner. His gaze moved to the wall behind my desk, where I had hung my credentials, my MBA from the State University, my certification as a certified turnaround professional, a framed letter of thanks from a manufacturing plant I had saved from liquidation 3 years ago. He read the letter. He took his time, efficient, brutal with the unnecessary, but kind to the people. He read aloud, quoting the text. He turned to face me. An interesting combination. "I find that kindness is cheaper when you are honest about the numbers," I replied. "Can I offer you coffee, Mr. Boss, or is this a short visit?" "That depends," he said. He walked over to the client chair opposite my desk and sat down. He did not unbutton his coat. "Please sit." I sat. It was my office. But he had effortlessly taken command of the room. "Sunday night," he began, his voice low and growly at the Snow Blast Lodge. "I was rude to you." "You were honest," I said. "You were reacting to information you had been given." "I was reacting to a memory," he corrected. "I told you I recognized you." It took me until the drive home to locate the file in my archives. He reached into his air coat pocket and pulled out a document. It was not a digital tablet or a sleek folder. It was an old spiral-bound report. The plastic cover yellowed with age, the corners slightly bent. He placed it on the desk between us. The sound of it hitting the wood was heavy, like a stone dropping into water. I looked at the cover. Operational Efficiency Debt Restructuring Plan. North Star Distribution. Prepared by Harper Rodriguez. Date October 2010. The air left my lungs. "North Star," I whispered. "I have not thought about that name in years." "I should hope not," Harlan said. It was a disaster. A small regional shipping outfit on the verge of imploding. Bad roads, worse management, bleeding cash. "I remember," I said, the details flooding back. I was 24 years old, fresh out of my MBA program, hungry and desperate to build a portfolio. I had taken the job for a flat fee of $500 because the owner couldn't afford a real consultant. The owner was a silent partner. I never met him. I dealt with the operations manager. The operations manager was an idiot, Harlan said bluntly. The silent partner was me. I stared at him. "You owned North Star. It was one of my first acquisitions outside of the main trucking line," he said. "I bought it for parts. I intended to strip it and sell the trucks. Then this report landed on my desk." He tapped the yellowed cover with a thick finger. "This report told me exactly where the bleed was. It told me to fire the operations manager, renegotiate the fuel contracts, and pivot to last-mile delivery for medical supplies. It was bold, it was mathematically sound, and it was written by a 24-year-old nobody. I didn't know it was you." I said, "I know. You did the work for $500. He said, "I implemented your plan." 6 months later, North Star was profitable. 2 years later, I folded it into Blue Crest. That division now generates $40 million a year. He leaned forward, his icy blue eyes locking onto mine. The intensity in them was scorching. "So when your brother Win Grant stood there in his $3,000 suit and introduced the woman who wrote this report as our family's failure," Harlan said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I felt a cognitive dissonance that I could not ignore." He sat back. "I do not believe in failures who generate $40 million in revenue." "Mrs. Rodriguez, MS. Rodriguez," I corrected automatically. "And thank you." "Do not thank me yet," he said. "I did not come here to reminisce." The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The nostalgia evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard steel of business. The thriller aspect of my life was about to begin, though I didn't know it yet. "Bluecrest is in trouble," Harlan said. "Market trouble?" I asked. "Internal trouble," he said. "We are leaking for the last 2 quarters. The numbers in the fulfillment division haven't been adding up. Small things at first. Fuel surcharges that are slightly above market rate. Vendor invoices for maintenance that happens too frequently. It is death by 1,000 cuts." I stayed silent, waiting. "I ordered a soft audit 3 weeks ago," Harron continued quietly. "Just my CFO and myself. We found patents. We found a network of preferred vendors that seem to have been onboarded in a hurry, bypassing standard procurement protocols." He paused, watching my face. "The manager who signed off on 80% of those vendor approvals is your brother." I did not flinch. I did not gasp. I had suspected this since 300, that morning when I found the LC for the wedding, but hearing it confirmed by the CEO gave the knowledge a terrifying weight. "Grant is ambitious," I said carefully. "He can be careless." "Careless is missing a decimal point," Harlan said sharply. "This is not carelessness. This is architecture. Someone is building a siphon inside my company." "Why come to me?" I asked. "You have a legal department. You have internal audit teams. You have the big 4 accounting firms on speed dial. Internal audit is friends with him," Harron said, disgust coloring his tone. "Grant is charming. He plays golf with the head of compliance. He buys drinks for the accounting team. If I trigger a formal investigation using internal resources, he will know within the hour. Documents will vanish. Hard drives will be wiped. And the big 4, they take weeks to mobilize. They send teams of 20-year-olds to check boxes." Harlan said, "I need a scalpel, not a sledgehammer, and I need someone who knows how a liar thinks." He gestured to the report on the desk. "You understand structure. You understand how to hide money, which means you understand how to find it. And more importantly," he leaned in again, "you are the failure. No one at Bluest considers you a threat. If I bring you in as an external consultant to optimize workflow for the merger, no one will blink. Grant will likely think he can manipulate you. He thinks you are weak. He does." I agreed. "I need you to go into Bluest," Harron said. "I want you to audit the fulfillment division. I want you to trace every dollar, every vendor, every contract your brother has touched in the last 24 months. I want you to build a case that is so watertight that not even the best labor lawyer in the state can drill a hole in it." He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a folded check. He slid it across the desk. It was face down. "That is a retainer," he said. "My hourly rate for you is triple whatever you are currently charging. The contract will be for 6 months." I looked at the check, then back at him. I did not pick it up. "Mr. Voss," I said slowly, "Grant is my brother." "I'm aware," he said. "Does that mean you will protect him?" I thought about the wedding contracts. I thought about the $16,600 he had stolen from me. I thought about the way he had smirked at the party while our parents nodded in agreement that I was nothing. "No," I said, "I will not protect him. I need to be clear about my terms." "Name them." "I am not a hitman," I said, my voice firm. "I am a professional. I will not manufacture evidence. I will not twist the data to fit a narrative. If I go in there, I follow the paper trail wherever it leads. If it leads to Grant, so be it. But if it leads to someone else, someone you trust, someone in your inner circle, I will report." That to Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly, evaluating me. And I continued, "I will not be part of a public shaming. I do the work. I deliver the report. What you do with it is your business. I do not want to be the one standing on the podium when the axe falls. I want to be the one who sharpened the blade and walked away." Harlan looked at me for a long moment. The silence stretched tight as a drum head. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Then slowly the corner of his mouth twitched upward. It wasn't a smile. Exactly. It was an expression of grim satisfaction. "You really aren't a Whitman, are you?" he said softly. "I am a Rodriguez," I said. "My ex-husband took the house, but I kept the work ethic." Harlan stood up. He buttoned his coat. "I do not want revenge, MS. Rodriguez," he said. "Revenge is emotional. It is messy. It is bad for business. I want the truth. If your brother is innocent, you will prove it. If he is guilty, you will document it. Agreed, I said. I stood up as well. He extended his hand this time. The handshake was not brief. It was a pact. His grip was iron. Come to the headquarters tomorrow at 9, he said. I will introduce you as the efficiency consultant for the new merger integration. Grant will probably try to offload his work onto you. Let him. He will certainly try, I said. Good, Harlan said. He walked to the door. Before he opened it, he turned back. And Ms. Rodriguez? Yes, that $19,000 loan your parents took out against your grandfather's estate? He asked. The one you mentioned paying off. I stiffened. I never told you about that. I do my due diligence, he said simply. A failure who pays off her own student loans and her brother's hidden debts is a rare asset. Do not undervalue yourself again, especially not to them. He opened the door. The cold air rushed in. See you at 9. The door clicked shut. I stood alone in the center of my office. The black SUV pulled away, disappearing into the traffic of downtown Boise. I looked down at the desk. The yellowed report from 14 years ago sat there. A ghost from a past I thought was buried. Next to it was the check. I turned the check over. The amount made my breath catch in my throat. It was $50,000 just for the retainer. I sat down slowly, my legs feeling a little weak. I had spent my life being the invisible support beam, the one who held up the structure while everyone else admired the facade. Grant had built a house of cards on a foundation of lies and other people's money. He thought he was untouchable because he had charm and because he had a sister who would always clean up his mess. But he had made a fatal error. He had introduced me to the one man who cared more about the structural integrity than the paid job. I picked up the phone and dialed my assistant who worked remotely from her home in Meridian. Cancel my appointments for the week, I said, and clear my schedule for the next 6 months. I just took a new contract. Big client, she asked. Huge, I said. And personal, I hung up. I pulled my laptop toward me. I didn't open the wedding folder this time. I opened a new file. I named it Project Blue Crest Audit Discovery. The cursor blinked against the white page, a steady rhythmic pulse. It looked like a heartbeat or a countdown. Grant wanted me to be involved in his business. He wanted to show me off as the family failure. Fine. I was going to be the best failure he had ever met. The contract Harlan Voss placed in front of me was standard in its legal ease, but extraordinary in its implications. It was a 6-month engagement to oversee the integration of 2 newly acquired subsidiaries into the Blue Crest ecosystem, specifically focusing on compliance and cost rationalization. The fee structure was aggressive. It was the kind of money that moves you from a tax bracket where you worry about deductions to a tax bracket where you worry about investments. I signed it with a steady hand. By Wednesday morning, I had a temporary office on the 4th floor of the Blue Crest headquarters in Boise. It was a glass-walled fishbowl located strategically between the finance department and the operations floor. Harlan had positioned me perfectly. I was visible enough to be seen as a part of the team, but separate enough to remain an observer. My official title was Senior Integration Advisor. To the staff, I was just another suit brought in to trim the fat after a merger. To Grant, I was a charity case who had finally gotten a lucky break. He stopped by my desk at 10:00 on my first day. He held a coffee cup in one hand and leaned against the door frame with that casual, practiced slouch he had perfected in his 30s. Glad to see you settled in, he said, beaming. I told Harron you were looking for work. I am glad he found something for you to do. It is mostly data entry and checking boxes, right? Easy stuff. He truly believed that he had planted the seed, and Harlan had hired me as a favor to him. The narcissism was so complete it acted as a shield against reality. It is a bit more than data entry, Grant, I said, keeping my eyes on my dual monitors. I am reconciling vendor overlap between the new acquisitions and legacy operations. Right? Right, he said, waving a hand dismissively. Just do not go too hard on the expense accounts. Okay, we have to keep morale up. Sales guys need their state dinners. He winked, a conspiratorial gesture that made my skin crawl. Anyway, We are heading to lunch at noon. Want to come? I can introduce you to the team properly. I brought my lunch. I said, I have a lot to get through. Suit yourself, he said, pushing off the door frame. Don't work too hard. It is just logistics. He walked away, whistling. I watched him go. Then I turned back to my screen and opened the file labeled Executive Reimbursements Q3 and Q4. I started with the low-hanging fruit. Grant's expense reports were a masterpiece of creative fiction. I pulled up his credit card statements and cross-referenced them with his calendar. The pattern emerged within the first hour. It was subtle, but to a forensic eye, it was as obvious as a neon sign. He listed a dinner on October 12th at the Golden Stag, the most expensive steakhouse in Sun Valley. The justification was client development prospective contract with Miller Manufacturing. The bill was $480. I checked the Miller Manufacturing file. There was no record of a meeting, no emails setting it up, no follow-up notes. I checked the wedding binder Grant had foolishly shared with me months ago when he wanted my help. October 12th was the date of his menu tasting for the rehearsal dinner. I kept digging. November 5th, a flight to Napa Valley. Expense code. Vendor relations wine distributor negotiation. Cost $1,200 for airfare and hotel. I checked the vendor list. Bluest did not distribute wine. They moved auto parts and dry goods. I checked Mallory's Instagram on November 5th. She had posted a photo of herself and Grant in a vineyard holding glasses of Cabernet with the caption, "Picking the perfect pour for our big day." He was expensing his wedding planning. He was funding his lifestyle on the company card and burying it under vague headings like client development and team building. It was bold, it was stupid, and it was theft. But it was small-time theft. A few thousand here and there. It was fireable, but it wasn't the systemic rot Harren had warned me about. I needed to find the mechanism. I moved from personal expenses to the vendor ledger. This was where the real money moved. In logistics, third-party vendors were the lifeblood of the operation. Trucking partners, warehouse staffing agencies, packaging suppliers. Millions of dollars flowed out to these entities every month. I filtered the data for new vendors onboarded in the last 6 months, the exact window where Grant had been promoted to regional oversight. There were 12 new vendors. Most were recognizable names, but one stood out. Keen Event Logistics, LLC. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline. I had seen this name before. It was the entity I had wired my own money to for the band and photographer, but here it was listed as an approved corporate supplier for Blue Crest. I opened their vendor profile. Service description, specialized corporate event coordination and venue scouting. Total payments in the last 4 months, $42,000. I sat back, exhaling slowly. $42,000. I clicked on the invoices. They were generic. Consulting services October. Venue liaison fee November. The amounts were always just under $10,000. Likely to avoid triggering automatic secondary approval flags from the CFO's office. But here was the twist. The contact person listed for the vendor wasn't Mallory. It was a T. Keene. I did a quick public record search. Travis Keene, Mallory's older brother. He was a personal trainer in Twin Falls. He had absolutely no background in corporate logistics or event planning. I traced the payment path. Bluecrest wired money to Keene Event Logistics, LLC. The LLC ostensibly was providing services. But when I cross-referenced the dates of the invoices with the dates of the wedding deposits I had seen in Grant's personal binder, the timeline locked into place. Bluest paid Keene Event Logistics on October 1st. On October 3rd, the deposit for the Snow Glass Lodge was paid. Bluecrest paid Keene Event Logistics on November 1st. On November 4th, the deposit for the florist was paid. Grant wasn't just stealing from the company. He had built a money laundering loop. He was using his fiancé's family to set up a shell company, approving them as a vendor, paying them for work that was never done, and then using that money to pay for his wedding. And he had the audacity to call me a failure. I printed the ledger. I printed the invoices. I printed the corporate registry for the LLC. My folder was growing thicker, but Harren had mentioned something else. He had mentioned vague search charges and modified contracts. I dove into the actual contract files. I pulled up the master service agreement for Keen Event Logistics. It looked standard at first glance, but I had access to the document history, the metadata that most people forgot existed. I opened the version history. The original template had been created by legal. It was a standard 2-page consulting agreement. Then, on September 14th at 11 at night, there was an edit user ID G. Whitman. Grant had logged in. He had added Clause 4B: vendor retains the right to bill for discretionary administrative overhead not to exceed 15% of total monthly volume. Discretionary administrative overhead. It was a blank check. It was a license to print money with no deliverables required. He had modified a legal document after it had cleared legal review, relying on the fact that no one would read the fine print of a small vendor contract again. I took a screenshot of the edit timestamp and the user ID. I was building the cage bar by iron bar. By Thursday afternoon, I had moved on to the operational side. I needed to see if his incompetence extended beyond theft and into actual work product. Everyone at Bluest talked about the I-90 corridor optimization project. It was the crown jewel of the quarter. It was a complex logistical model that had streamlined the shipping routes across the northern states, saving the company an estimated $3 million annually. Grant had received a bonus for it. He had presented it to the board. It was the primary reason he was being groomed for a VP role. I pulled up the project files. The final presentation was slick. Grant's name was on the title slide in bold letters. I went into the source data. The actual modeling had been done in a complex Excel macro workbook involving thousands of rows of data and sophisticated coding. I right-clicked on the Excel file. Properties details. Author Jonah Ray's last saved by Grant Whitman. I looked at the editing time. Jonah Ray's 140 hours. Grant Whitman 20 minutes. I looked up Jonah Ray's in the company directory. He was a junior analyst, 23 years old, hired 6 months ago. He sat in a cubicle near the printer room. I accessed the internal email server. As an auditor, I had read only privileges to the department's communications. I searched for emails between Grant and Jonah. I found a chain from 2 months ago from Jonah Ray's to Grant Whitman. Subject draft of I-90 model. Hi Grant. I finished the coding for the route optimization. I think this could really work. Should I send it to the team for review from Grant Whitman to Jonah Ray's? Subject red draft of I-90 model. No, do not send it to anyone. You are missing the strategic context. Jonah, send the raw file to me. I need to fix the parameters before it is ready for executive eyes. And Jonah, focus on your data entry. Leave this strategy to management. I will let you know if I can use any of this. 2 days later, Grant sent the file to Heron Voss with the subject line, my solution for the I-90 bottleneck. He didn't just steal money, he stole potential. He looked at a brilliant young kid who was eager to prove himself, and he crushed him, took his work, and claimed it as his own. I sat there staring at the email. This made me angrier than the money. Money was just math, but this was predatory. It reminded me of every time my parents had taken my achievements and repackaged them as family success, or ignored them entirely while praising Grant for tying his shoes. I looked across the glass partition. I could see Grant's office. He was sitting at his desk, laughing into his phone, feet propped up on the drawer. He looked like a king in his castle. He had no idea that 50 is T away. His sister was dissecting his life frame by frame. I did not storm into his office. I did not forward the emails to HR. Not yet. Karen had asked for a case that was watertight. I needed more than just a smoking gun. I needed a firing squad of evidence. I created a master timeline. I plotted every expense report, every wire transfer to the LLC, every contract modification, and every stolen project on a single axis. September 14th, LLC formed. Grant edits contract. September 16th, Grant asks me for money. October 1st, Bluest pays LLC. October 3rd, Grant pays venue. October 12th, Grant expenses client dinner menu tasting. October 20th, Grant steals Jonah's model. It was a cascade of fraud. I saved the file to an encrypted external drive. I named it Whitman Audit Evidence V1. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Grant. "Hey, Mom and Dad. Want to know if you are coming for Sunday dinner. Try to make it. Dad wants to hear about your little data entry job. I told him I'm keeping an eye on you." I stared at the screen. My little data entry job. I typed back, "I will be there." I set the phone down. The office was quieting down as people left for the day. The cleaning crew was starting their rounds. I looked at the empty cubicle near the printer room where John Rear sat. Tomorrow I would find a way to talk to him. I wouldn't tip my hand, but I needed to know if there was more because men like Grant never stopped at just one victim. I packed up my laptop. I've put on my coat. As I walked past the security desk in the lobby, the guard nodded at me. "Working late? A mess. Rodriguez, just catching up on some reading," I said. I walked out into the cold, Boise evening. The wind was biting, but I barely felt it. I felt the heat of the evidence burning a hole in my bag. The paper trail was not just a trail anymore. It was a noose, and Grant had tied the knot himself. All I had to do was wait for him to kick the chair away. The silence of my glass-walled office was deceptive. While the air conditioning hummed a steady white noise rhythm, my phone was vibrating across the desk with the manic energy of a trapped insect. Grant. It was the 5th time he had called in the last hour. I let it go to voicemail. I was in the middle of reconciling a logistics ledger, and I refused to let his panic dictate my schedule. But 10 seconds later, the office line rang. He was bypassing my cell. I picked up the receiver. "Rodriguez, Harper, pick up your damn cell phone." Grant's voice hissed in my ear. He sounded breathless, like he had been running upstairs. "We need to get our story straight." "I do not have a story, Grant," I said, keeping my voice level and my eyes on the screen, "and I am working." "Listen to me," he said, dropping his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "Harlan is digging. He is asking questions about the vendor onboarding process. If he asks you, I need you to tell him that you consulted on the Keen account structure. Tell him you advised me that the 15% overhead was industry standard for a boutique agency." I stopped typing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. "You want me to lie to the CEO who hired me?" I asked. "You want me to tell him that I authorized a 15% search charge for a shell company run by your fiancé's brother?" "It is not a lie. It is retroactive consulting." Drax stammered. "You are a consultant. That is what you do. You fix things. Just say we discussed it over dinner a few months ago. Say I was following your professional advice on how to structure the payments to ensure priority service. Harper, please, if you do this, I can explain the rest. I just need a professional shield." "I am not your shield, Rad," I said. "I am an auditor. I am your brother." His voice cracked, the whisper vanishing into a desperate shout that made me pull the receiver away from my ear. "Do you know what will happen if this blows up? It won't just be me. It will be Mallory. It will be the wedding. Mom and Dad will be humiliated. Do you want that? Do you want to be the reason Mom cries at the rehearsal dinner?" "I have to go," I said. "Do not hang up on me, Harper." I gently placed the receiver back in the cradle. My hand was shaking just slightly. It was not fear. It was a physical reaction to the toxicity, like my body was trying to reject a virus. Grant was not just asking for a favor. He was trying to make me an accomplice. He wanted to shift the narrative so that if the fraud was discovered, it would look like bad advice from an external consultant me rather than theft by an internal manager. He was trying to set me up as the incompetent one, the failure who gave him bad directions. 2 minutes later, my personal phone lit up again. "Incoming call, Mom." I stared at it. Grant worked fast. I answered. "Hello, Colleen. Your brother sounds frantic." My mother said. There was no greeting. "No. How are you?" "Just the immediate accusatory launch. He says you are being difficult at work. He says he is trying to navigate some complex corporate politics and you are refusing to back him up. He is asking me to lie to my employer." "Mother." "Oh, Harper, always so dramatic." With the words she sighed, the sound of long-suffering martyrdom. "It is not lying. It is family loyalty. Grant is under a lot of pressure. He's about to get married. He is building a future. You have your little business. But Grant has a career, a reputation. Can't you just help him smooth over a few rough patches for me? I cannot break the law for you." No, I said, Lore. She laughed, a sharp dismissive sound. You sound just like your father when he gets in a mood. Speaking of which, he wants a word. There was a fumbling sound. And then my father's voice came on the line. It was deeper, harsher. Harper, Richard said, I do not know what game you are playing, getting a job at your brother's company just to undermine him. But it stops now. You are being selfish. You have always been jealous of Grant's success, but trying to sabotage him right before his wedding is a new low, even for you. I did not ask for this job, I said, my voice tightening. I was headhunted. You were hired because of your last name, Richard snapped. Because you are a Whitman. Do not forget that. Now, whatever Grant needs you to sign or say, you do it. We are a family. We protect our own. Do not make me come down there and cause a scene. Goodbye, Richard, I said. I hung up. I turned the phone face down. I felt a hollow ache in my chest. The old wound reopening. We protect our own. But they never meant me. I was not their own. I was the utility player, the spare part kept in the trunk in case the main engine failed. A text message pinged on my laptop screen, linked to my phone. It was from Mallory. Mallory, Grant is pacing the living room. He says you are trying to get him fired. I don't know what your problem is, Harper, but you are ruining my wedding. If Grant loses this job, we lose the deposit on the house. How can you be so cruel? I looked at the message. I thought about the $42,000 funneled into her brother's LC. I thought about the menu tasting that was just a dinner on the company card. I typed back, I am doing the job I was hired to do. If Grant has done nothing wrong, he has nothing to fear. I blocked her number. I needed to clear my head. I stood up and walked out of my office. The floor was buzzing with the usual mid-morning activity, but the atmosphere felt charged. I could feel eyes on me. Two account managers by the water cooler stopped talking as I walked by. They looked at me, then exchanged a glance. Grant had been busy. He was seating the ground. I could almost hear the whispers. Harper is jealous. Harper is unstable. The sister is trying to take the brother's job. I walked toward the break room intending to get water, but I stopped when I saw Jonah Reyes. The young analyst was standing by the copier, looking terrified. He was clutching a stack of papers, his knuckles white. Grant was standing over him, one hand resting on the wall above Jonah's head, boxing him in. Grant was smiling, but it was a sharp smile. I just need you to check the timestamp on that file again. Jonah, Grant was saying, his voice loud enough for the nearby cubicles to hear. I think you might have accidentally overwritten my original work. You know how glitchy the server can be. We wouldn't want anyone thinking you plagiarized the strategy, right? He was gaslighting the kid. He was setting up a fallback plan if the theft of the I-90 model was discovered. Grant would claim Jonah was the one who copied him or that it was a technical error. I stepped forward. Grant, I said. My voice was sharp, cutting through the ambient noise. Grant turned. His smile didn't waver, but his eyes went flat. Harper, just giving the junior team some pointers. Mr. Voss needs the updated compliance logs for the logistics merger. I lied smoothly. I need Jonah to pull the raw data for me immediately. It is time sensitive. Grant hesitated. He looked from me to Jonah. He knew I was interfering, but he couldn't refuse a direct request that invoked the CEO. Fine, Grant said, patting Jonah hard on the shoulder. We will finish this chat later, buddy. He walked away, brushing past me with a deliberate bump of his shoulder against mine. Jonah let out a breath that sounded like a sob. MS. Rodriguez, he whispered. I didn't overwrite anything. I know, I said softly. Come with me. I took him to a small conference room and closed the door. Listen to me, Jonah. Document everything, every email, every conversation, every file change. Save it to a personal drive. Do not engage with him alone. He said I was confused, Jonah said, his eyes wide with distress. He said I remembered it wrong. You are not confused, I said firmly. Keep your head down. Do the work I give you. I will handle the rest. I left him there, safer than he was in the hallway. I was fighting a war on two fronts. Now protecting myself from my family and protecting the innocent bystanders from the foreloved. When I returned to my desk, my internal line rang. MS. Rodriguez. Harlan Voss's voice was gravel and steel. "Come up to my office now." I took the elevator to the top floor. Harlan's executive assistant waved me in immediately. Harren was standing by the window looking out at the snow-covered Boise foothills. On his desk was a single sheet of paper. "Close the door," he said. "I did. I told you I wanted the truth," Harlan said, turning to face me. "I did not tell you I wanted to be played for a fool." "I do not understand," I said. "Grant sent me an email an hour ago." Harlan said he expressed concern about your objectivity. He claimed that during a family dinner 3 months ago, you advised him to set up the expedited vendor channel for the wedding logistics to ensure reliability. He claims he was following your expert restructuring advice. "That is a lie," I said calmly. "I was not aware of the vendor channel until this week." "I assumed as much," Harlan said. "Grant is flailing. He is throwing sand in my eyes, hoping I will blink. But that is not why I called you up here." He pointed to the paper on the desk. "Accounting just flagged a discrepancy in the quarterly forecast. A wire transfer request was submitted yesterday evening pending approval for Friday. It is for $12,500. "Okay," I said. "For what?" "Consulting retainers." Harren said the pay is listed as Rodriguez Strategic Solutions. I frowned. "My company is Rodriguez Business Restructuring. I have never used the name Strategic Solutions." "I know," Harlan said, "but look at the routing number." I picked up the paper. It was a transfer request form. The beneficiary name was indeed Rodriguez Strategic Solutions. The bank account number was not mine. It was an account at a credit union in Twin Falls. "I did not submit this," I said. "I know you didn't," Harren said, "because the submission came from an external email address that looks very much like yours." He handed me a tablet. On the screen was an email chain from H. Rodriguez Consulting Net to accounts payable. Subject invoice Gen 44 expedited retainer. Please process the attached invoice for the preliminary strategic assessment of the Keene account as discussed with Mr. Whitman. This is for the accelerated timeline analysis. I stared at the email address. My actual email was hrodriguezconsulting.com. The email on the screen ended in net. "It is a spoof," I said, my blood running cold. "Someone bought the net domain. I had it run a trace." Harren said the domain was purchased 4 days ago. The email was sent from a web client, but here's the interesting part. The IP address used to access the web client matches the IP address of the guest Wi-Fi network in this building. I looked up at him. "Someone in the building sent this. Someone who wants to create a paper trail linking you to the Keene account." Harlan said, "If this invoice is paid and then the Keene fraud is discovered, it looks like you were the architect. You get the money, you gave the advice. Grant becomes the victim of his sister's greedy consulting scheme. It was not just a cover-up anymore. It was a frame job. Grant, or whoever was helping him, had realized that I was a threat. He knew he couldn't just talk his way out of the embezzlement, so he had decided to drag me into the pit with him. He was manufacturing evidence to prove that the family failure was actually a criminal mastermind who had duped her innocent brother. He is trying to send me to prison," I whispered. "He is trying to survive," Harren said coldly. "A drowning man will climb on top of anyone to get air, even his sister." "Who approved the invoice?" I asked. "No one yet," Harlan said. "I flagged it, but the intent is clear." I looked at the fake invoice again. It was amateurish, but effective enough to fool a tired accounts payable clerk. "I need to prove he bought that domain." I said the domain was registered privately. Harlan said proxy service. "We can't see the owner. He used a credit card." I said, my mind racing. "He is not smart enough to use crypto. He used a card. And if he bought it 4 days ago." I remembered something. 4 days ago, we were at the Sunday dinner at my parents' house. Grant had been on his laptop in the den for an hour, claiming he had to put out a fire at work. "I can find it," I said. "I need access to the proxy logs for the guest Wi-Fi on the day the domain was purchased." "You have it," Harren said. "But Harper, be careful. If he is willing to fabricate invoices and spoof domains, he has crossed a line. This is no longer just office politics. This is fraud, identity theft. If we pin this on him, he is not just getting fired. He is going to be prosecuted. I thought about the phone calls, the guilt trips from my parents, the text from Mallory. They were all part of the distraction, the noise to keep me off balance while he slid the knife between my ribs. He crossed the line when he stole my name, I said. He crossed the line when he tried to make me the villain in his story. So, Harlan asked. So, I said, placing the fake invoice back on the desk. I am going to catch him. And I am not just going to catch him stealing from you. I am going to catch him trying to steal my life. I turned to leave. Harper Herring called out. I stopped. The account number on that fake invoice, he said. The one in Twin Falls. Does it look familiar? I looked at the numbers again. I hadn't recognized it at first, but now that I looked at the string, it wasn't my account, but I had seen a similar string of numbers recently. It was the same bank where my parents held their retirement accounts. It is a sub-account, I realized, linked to a primary holder. If he is using a family account to stash the money he frames you for taking, Harlan said softly, then your parents might be more involved than just making phone calls. The floor seemed to tilt beneath my feet. I will find out, I said. I walked out of the office. The elevator ride down felt like a descent into hell. My brother was framing me. My parents were potentially providing the banking infrastructure for the frame-up, and I was the only one who didn't know the script. I walked back to my desk. Grant was there, leaning over my partition, smiling that charming boyish smile. Hey, he said. Mom texted. She said you hung up on her. Not cool. Harper, she's really upset. Why do you have to be so difficult? I looked at him. I looked at the man I had shared a childhood with, the man I had protected from bullies. The man whose debts I had paid. He wasn't my brother anymore. He was a parasite. I am sorry, Grant, I said, my voice eerily calm. I have just been very busy. I promise I will make it up to everyone. His smile widened. He thought he had won. He thought I was folded. That is the spirit. He said, we are family. We stick together. Yes, I said, sitting down and unlocking my screen. We certainly do. As he walked away, I opened a new terminal window. I wasn't going to look for billing errors anymore. I was going to hunt. The digital footprint of a lie is often more durable than the truth. I sat in the glow of my monitors. The office deserted around me. It was 7:00 in the evening. The cleaning crew was vacuuming the hallway, the rhythmic drone providing a backdrop to the dissection I was performing on my own identity. Harlan had given me the spoofed email, the one sent from I'm Rodriguez Consulting Net, and asked me to trace the ghost. I opened the raw header data. To the untrained eye, an email is just a message to a forensic auditor. It is a passport stamped with every stop it made across the internet. The content of the email was the first giveaway. It was written in a voice that tried too hard to sound authoritative. It used phrases like synergistic leverage and accelerated fiscal alignment. I do not talk like that. My reports are dry, precise, and devoid of buzzwords. This email read like a business school undergraduate trying to impress a professor. It read like Grant. I pulled the IP logs that it had quietly dropped into my secure folder. The email requesting the fraudulent $12,000 transfer was sent on Tuesday at 8:45 in the evening. I cross-referenced the IP address 192.16, 8.4.1. It was an internal IP. Specifically, it mapped to the hardline connection in Grant's office. That was sloppy. He had stayed late, logged into the fake email account he had created, and sent the invoice request from his own work computer, assuming the IT department would never audit a manager's traffic. But then I found the second log. There was a login to the fake email account's administrative panel, the dashboard used to manage the domain settings. This login happened on Sunday afternoon at 3:30. The IP address for this session was not internal. It was residential. ISB Sparklight Fiber Twin Falls region. I stared at the screen. Twin Falls. My parents lived in Twin Falls. I checked the timestamp again. Sunday, 3:30 in the afternoon. That was during the family dinner. I remembered the scene vividly. I was helping my mother with the dishes. My father was watching football. Grant had excused himself to go into the den, claiming he needed to check on a shipment. He hadn't been checking on a shipment. He had been sitting at my father's desk, using my parents' internet connection, setting up the fake domain that would frame me for fraud. And here was the knife in the gut. My father's computer was password protected. Grant didn't know the password. He would have had to ask, "Dad, can I use the computer? I need to handle some business." "Sure, son. It is the same password as always." My father had unlocked the door so my brother could rob me. I felt a cold mist spread through my limbs that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. It was the chill of absolute clarity. I was not a daughter to them. I was not a sister. I was a resource. I was a line of credit to be drawn upon until maxed out, and then a scapegoat to be slaughtered when the bill came due. Speaking of credit, if Grant felt comfortable stealing my professional identity, what had he done with my personal one? I opened a new browser window. I navigated to the annual credit report portal. My fingers trembled slightly as I typed in my social security number. I answered the verification questions. Which of the following addresses have you lived at? What is the model of your car? The report loaded. My credit score was 680. That was wrong. My score was usually over 800. I had zero debt. I paid my credit cards in full every month. I had no mortgage since the divorce. I scrolled down to the active account section. There it was. Lender Canyon State Auto Finance. Type installment, loan automotive. Open date 24 months ago. Original balance $40, 8,000. Current balance $35,000. Status late 30 days. I had never bought a $40, 8,000 car. I clicked on the details. The vehicle was a luxury SUV, a massive leather-seated status symbol. I knew that car. It was the car my father drove 2 years ago. My father had pulled up to my house in a brand new SUV. He told me he had finally treated himself, that his investments had paid off. I had been happy for him. I had congratulated him. He had bought it in my name. I looked at the address on the loan. It was my parents' house in Twin Falls. I looked at the security questions used to open the account online. Question: what was the name of your first pet? Answer: Buster. Question: what is your mother's maiden name? Answer: Sullivan. These were questions only a family member could answer. They hadn't hacked me. They hadn't stolen my wallet. They simply used the knowledge they had of my life, the intimate details of my childhood, to bypass the security checks. Grant must have set it up. Richard must have signed the papers. Or Grant forged my signature. And they had been driving this stolen car for 2 years, making payments when they felt like it and missing them when they didn't, destroying my credit score in the process. I closed my eyes. A single tear leaked out, hot and angry. I wiped it away immediately. There would be no crying. Crying was for people who had hoped that things could be fixed with an apology. This could not be fixed. This had to be cauterized. I picked up my phone. I did not call my parents. I did not call Grant. I called the fraud department of the credit bureau. I need to freeze my credit immediately. I told the automated voice system, I am a victim of identity theft. Next, I logged into the federal identity theft portal and filed an official affidavit. I listed the car loan. I listed the unauthorized inquiries. I attached the PDF of the credit report. Then I searched for a lawyer, not a corporate lawyer, a shark. I found a firm in Boise that specialized in financial fraud and elder abuse, though in this case, the abuse was reversed. I sent a retainer request through their secure portal. My phone buzzed on the desk. It was a text from Grant. Mom says you are acting weird. She says you didn't call her back. I know you're stressed about the job, Harper, but do not take it out on them. Do you want to destroy this family over nothing? I stared at the words, destroy this family. He truly believed that I was the danger. He believed that his theft was just a necessary adjustment, and my reaction to it was the act of aggression. It was a breathtaking level of delusion. I did not reply. I took a screenshot of the text. I added it to the folder. The next morning at 9:00 sharp, I stood outside the executive conference room on the top floor. Harren Voss was there. Beside him sat 2 people who terrified most of the employees at Bluecrest. Dana Kilpatrick was the head of compliance. She was a woman who looked like she could spot a typo from across the room. She wore steel-rimmed glasses and had never been known to smile. Miles Carver was the in-house counsel. He was younger, sharp-featured, and had the predatory calmness of a man who knew where all the bodies were buried because he had dug the holes. "Ms. Rodriguez," Miles said, gesturing to a chair. "Harlan tells us you have a presentation." "I do," I said. I placed 3-bound dossier on the table. I did not sit down. "This is not a presentation," I said. "This is a crime scene report." Dana opened the folder. Her eyes widened slightly as she saw the first page. "I was hired to audit the integration of the new subsidiaries," I began, my voice steady. "In the course of that review, I discovered a systemic embezzlement scheme operating within the fulfillment division." "Systemic is a big word," Miles noted, flipping through the pages. "It is the only word that fits." I said, "I have documented unauthorized vendor onboarding, specifically an entity known as Keen Event Logistics LLC. This entity has billed Bluecrest $42,000 in the last quarter for services that were never rendered." I pointed to the page in Dana's hand. Exhibit A shows the formation date of the LLC. Exhibit B shows the first invoice. You will note the invoice predates the vendor approval by 48 hours. The system override to approve the vendor was authorized by Grant Whitman. Dana looked up. "Your brother," the manager of the division, I corrected. "I am here as an independent auditor. My biological relation to the subject is irrelevant to the data." Miles leaned forward. "Harlan mentioned a conflict of interest. He said there was an allegation that you consulted on this structure. That is the second part of the dossier." I said identity theft and fabrication of evidence. I walked them through the IP logs. I showed them the spoofed email. I showed them the timestamp of the domain purchase matching the timestamp of Grant's presence at the residential address in Twin Falls. The subject attempted to create a paper trail implicating me in his fraud. I said he used company resources, your network, your hardware to commit this act. He also used an external residential network to set up the infrastructure. Miles looked at the IP log. "This residential IP, can we link it to him? It is the home of Richard and Colleen Whitman." I said my parents and the subject was present at that location on the date and time in question. The room went silent. Dana took off her glasses. She looked at me with a mixture of horror and professional respect. "He used your parents' house to frame you." "Yes," I said, "and he did it while I was in the kitchen washing their dishes." I didn't let the emotion linger. I moved to the kill shot. "But the fraud is not limited to financial theft. It includes intellectual property theft." I projected the metadata of the I-90 optimization model onto the screen on the wall. "The I-90 project saved this company $3 million," I said. "Grant Whitman claimed sole credit. He received a bonus of $25,000 for it." I pointed to the screen. "The metadata proves the file was created and coded by Jonah Reyes, a junior analyst. Grant Whitman's only contribution was to change the title slide and forbid Mr. Reyes from speaking to management." Miles Carver let out a low whistle. "Liability," he muttered. "If the kid sues for wage, theft, or hostile work environment." "Exactly." I said. "This is comprehensive," Dana said. She closed the folder. "I have seen federal indictments with less documentation than this." "I am thorough," I said. "What do you want, Ms. Rodriguez?" Miles asked. "You have given us enough to fire him 10 times over. Do you want us to call the police?" "Not yet," I said. Harlan looked at me from the head of the table. He hadn't spoken, but he was watching me closely. "I want the loop closed," I said. "Grant is reactive. If you fire him today, he will destroy evidence. He will wipe his laptop. He will call his fiancé's family and tell them to shred the LOC documents. He will claim I planted the files." "So what is the play?" Harlan asked. "We let him hang himself," I said. "He believes I am cornered. He believes his threat to destroy the family has silenced me. He is feeling confident. When a man like Grant feels confident, he gets greedy." I looked at Miles. "I need access to the full email archive for the last 2 years. Not just the metadata, the content. I need to know who else helped him. Because a manager doesn't bypass 4 levels of compliance regarding vendor approval without a friend in the system." Dana stiffened. "You think he has an accomplice inside?" "I think he is charming," I said. "And I think he has used the company credit card to buy a lot of dinners for people in this building." I want to know who ate the steak. Miles nodded slowly. You will have the access by noon. But Harper, once you pull that thread, the whole sweater might unravel if we find out he compromised other departments. Then you clean house, I said. That is what you hired me for. I gathered my papers. One more thing, I said, pausing at the door. I have frozen my credit and filed a police report regarding a fraudulent auto loan opened in my name by the Whitman family. If Bluist receives any communication from debt collectors or legal entities regarding my solvency, please direct them to my personal attorney. Daner looked like she was about to be sick. He took out a loan in your name. They all did, I said. I walked out. My hands were not shaking anymore. The cold numbness was gone, replaced by a burning, focused energy. I had just handed the executioner the sword. Now I just had to make sure Grant put his head on the block. I went back to my desk. I saw Grant coming out of the break room. He waved at me, a little smirk playing on his lips. He pointed to his phone, mimicking a call me gesture. I didn't wave back. I just looked at him. Enjoy the coffee, Grant. I thought it is going to be the last thing you enjoy for a very long time. The Friday evening traffic in Boise was a ribbon of red tail, lights blurring in the sleet. But I was not heading home. I was driving to a diner on the outskirts of town, a place with vinyl seats and coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts. My Aunt Joni had called me an hour ago. Joni was my mother's younger sister. In the hierarchy of the Whitman family, she occupied a space similar to mine, present but silent, useful for holiday preparation, but ignored during the toasts. She was a woman who had spent her life shrinking to fit the small spaces her louder relatives left for her. When she spoke on the phone, her voice had been a thread about to snap. Harper, please, not the house. Somewhere they won't see us. I sat in the back booth watching the door. When Joni entered, she looked like she had aged 10 years since the engagement party. Her coat was buttoned wrong. Her eyes were darting around the room, as if she expected my father to jump out from behind the pie counter. She slid into the booth opposite me. She did not take off her coat. She placed a heavy manila envelope on the sticky table between us. They are going to hate me, she whispered. Her hands were trembling. Colleen will never speak to me again. Why are you here, Joni? I asked gently. I did not touch the envelope yet. Because I can't sleep, she said. I see what Grant is doing. I see the way he looks at you, and I hear your parents talking on the phone, planning how to manage the narrative. She pushed the envelope toward me. You need to know the beginning of it. Harper, you think this started with the wedding money. You think it started with the car loan, but it started a long time ago. I opened the clasp. Inside were photocopies of old bank documents. They smelled of mildew and cedar, like they had been stored in a basement chest for a very long time. I pulled out the top sheet. It was a trust fund statement. The Walter Sullivan Education Trust. My grandfather. I scanned the columns. Grandpa Walter left money for college. I said, I know. Dad told me the market crashed, and the fund was wiped out right before I graduated high school. The market didn't crash, Harper. Joni said, her voice shaking. Look at the date on the withdrawal slip. I looked. August 15th, 2005. I froze. August of 2005. I was 19 years old. I had just finished my freshman year at the State University. I was working double shifts at the library because my father had told me there was no money to help me with tuition. I was eating instant noodles and walking 3 miles to campus because I couldn't afford a parking pass. The withdrawal amount was $60,000. The beneficiary line did not say Harper Rodriguez. It said Grant Whitman, and the signature at the bottom authorizing the transfer was distinct. It was the sharp, aggressive scroll of my father, Richard Whitman. He moved it, Joni said. He petitioned the trustee, who was his old golf buddy, to reallocate the funds based on imminent family necessity. He claimed you had received a full scholarship and didn't need it. He lied, Harper. He took your share of Walter's money, and he put it into a high-yield account for Grant. I stared at the paper. The numbers blurred. Grant was 14, I said. He was in high school. He wanted to go to that private prep school in Seattle. Joni said the one with the rowing team. Richard said Grant needed the connections. He said you were tough, that you could handle public school and loans. He said Grant was delicate, that he needed a head start. Delicate, I repeated. I knew. Joni sobbed quietly, pressing a napkin to her mouth. I was the witness on the notary form. I signed it. Harper, I am so sorry. Richard said it was best for the family. He said if I told you, I would be causing drama. He said I would be the reason the family fell apart. So, you let me take out $40,000 in student loans, I said. My voice was dangerously quiet. You let me work nights. You let me believe we were poor. I was afraid, she said. You know how they are. If you go against Richard and Colleen, you cease to exist. They cut you out. I didn't want to be alone. She reached across the table, trying to touch my hand. I pulled back. But now, Joni continued, wiping her eyes. Now, I see Grant driving that family into a ditch. I heard about the investigation at his work. I heard Richard shouting about legal fees. Harper, they are going to drag you down to save him again. I couldn't watch it happen twice. I looked at the documents. It wasn't just theft. It was a systematic cannibalization of my future to feed Grant's ego. My grandfather had tried to give me a ladder. My father had chopped it up to build a pedestal for my brother. Thank you for bringing this to me, I said. I gathered the papers and put them back in the envelope. What would you do? Joni asked. Are you going to sue them? I am going to finish my job. I said. I left the diner. I sat in my car for a long time, the heater running, staring at the envelope on the passenger seat. The car loan fraud wasn't an isolated incident. The wedding embezzlement wasn't a desperate mistake. It was a lifestyle. My family operated on a simple economic principle. Harper earns. Grant spends. Harper sacrifices. Grant bribes. I drove to the Bluest headquarters. It was late, but I knew the lights would be on in the executive wing. Harlan Voss was in his office. He was reading a brief, a glass of water on his desk. He didn't look surprised to see me. I placed the envelope on his desk. This is not company business, I said, but it speaks to character. Harlan opened the envelope. He read the trust documents. He saw the withdrawal. He saw the date. He looked up, and his expression was one of profound sorrow. Walter Sullivan was a good man, Harlan said softly. I knew him. Did you know that we served on a community development board together in the Nimes? He talked about his grandkids. He used to say he wanted to make sure you all had the choices he never had. He gave me a choice, I said. My father took it and gave it to the boy, who is currently falsifying invoices in my logistics department. Herring concluded. He closed the file. This explains the psychology. Harlan said Grant has never faced a consequence in his life. He believes resources are infinite because for him they always have been. Someone else always pays the bill. I am done paying. I said, good. Harlan said, because we have verified the IP logs. We have the forensic data on the I-90 project. And thanks to your lead on the fake invoice, we have traced the attempted wire transfer directly to a laptop registered to your father. My father, Richard Whitman's personal device, Harlan confirmed. Grant didn't just use their Wi-Fi. He used his father's computer to attempt to frame you, which means Richard either knew and allowed it, or he is so negligent regarding his own security that he is an accessory by default. He knew, I said. He called me. He told me to do whatever Grant needed. Harlan stood up and walked to the window. We have enough for a criminal referral, he said. Graham Laraseni, wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. The district attorney would take this case in a heartbeat. I stood there, the weight of the decision pressing on me. No, I said. Harlan turned. No, not a criminal referral. Not yet. I said, if we go to the police now, it becomes a circus. The local news will pick it up. Local family and fraud. Scandal. It will be messy. Grant will play the victim. My parents will go on TV and cry about their ungrateful daughter. It will be a war of public opinion, and facts get lost in the noise. Then what is your end game? Harper, I want the internal hearing. I said I want the corporate disciplinary tribunal, strict, private, by the book. I want the facts laid out in a room where crying doesn't count as evidence. I want Grant to sit there and look at the numbers and realize there is no mother to hide behind and no father to write a check. You want to break him with bureaucracy, Harlan said, a glint of appreciation in his eyes. I want to break him with the truth. I said, I want the record to be undeniable. Once Bluecrest fires him for cause and once the civil suit for restitution is filed, then we hand it to the police. But first, I want him to lose the only thing he actually cares about, his status. Harlan said, yes. Harlan nodded. We scheduled the hearing for Tuesday. You will present the findings. I will be there, I said. I went home, but my phone didn't stop buzzing. It wasn't my parents this time. It was Grant, but he wasn't calling me. He was texting the group chat, the one that included me, my parents, and Mallory. Grant, everyone needs to calm down. I fixed the issue at work. Harper is just confused about some new protocols. We are all good. Wedding is still on track. He was lying to them. He was lying to himself. Then a separate message came through from Jonah Reyes. Jonah Ms. Rodriguez, Grant just called me at home. He told me if I didn't sign a statement saying the I-90 model was a collaborative effort, he would make sure I never worked in this industry again. He said he knows people. I typed back immediately, Harper, do not answer him. Do not sign anything. Forward the voicemail to me. You are safe. Then a text from Mallory. Mallory, Harper, please. Grant is tearing the house apart, looking for some file. He says you stole it. He is screaming at me. He says if the LLC gets audited, it is my fault. I am scared. I looked at the message. Mallory was an accomplice. Yes, she had signed the papers for the LLC, but she was also a victim of Grant's reality distortion field. Harper, tell him you don't know where it is. Go to your parents' house. Mallory, get away from him. I put the phone down. The house of cards was collapsing. Grant was flailing, striking out at everyone. The analyst, the fiancé, the sister. He was panicked because the one trick that had always worked, calling mom and dad to fix it, wasn't working against the cold hard wall of forensic accounting. I walked into my kitchen and made a cup of tea. I stood by the window, watching the snow bury the driveway. For 38 years, I had been the family failure. I had been the one who didn't measure up. I had been the one who had to scrape and save and borrow while Grant was handed the world on a silver platter paid for with my inheritance. I thought about Aunt Joni sitting in that diner, terrified of her own sister. I thought about my grandfather, Walter, who had wanted me to have a choice. I took a sip of tea. It was hot and bitter. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge was hot. Revenge was screaming matches and thrown vases. This was something else. This was a correction. I was balancing the ledger. And on Tuesday morning, inside the glass walls of the Bluecrest conference room, the Whitman family was finally going to learn that you cannot spend credit. You do not have forever. The audit was finished, the bill was printed, and I was the one coming to collect. Monday morning began not with a coffee, but with an assault on my character. I had arrived at the Bluest offices at 7:30 preparing for the upcoming disciplinary hearing. By 8:00, a notification popped up on my screen. It was an email marked high importance. The sender was Grant Whitman. The recipients included Harren Voss, Miles Carver, Dana Kilpatrick, the entire HR department, and crucially my parents' personal email addresses. The subject line read, Formal complaint, conflict of interest and extortion regarding Harper Rodriguez. I opened it. My heart rate remained surprisingly steady. I had expected noise. I just hadn't realized how loud it would be. Dear Executive Team, Grant wrote, It breaks my heart to have to write this, but I can no longer stay silent. The recent audit conducted by Ms. Rodriguez is not an objective review. It is a retaliatory attack stemming from a personal family dispute regarding my upcoming wedding. Furthermore, I am attaching evidence that Ms. Rodriguez attempted to extort a percentage of the vendor fees in exchange for her silence. She is not the auditor. She is the architect. Attached were 3 image files. They appeared to be screenshots of a text message conversation between Grant and me. In the first image, a contact labeled Harper wrote, If you want me to sign off on the key invoices, I need a 20% cut. I have bills to pay. In the second image, Harper wrote, Don't make this hard. Grant, I know how to hide the money. Just wire it to my account, and I will clear the vendor list. I stared at the screen. The fabrication was breathless in its audacity. He wasn't just defending himself. He was trying to nuke my career from orbit. He was betting on the idea that the accusation alone would be enough to muddy the waters, to pause the investigation, to give him time to breathe. My office door opened. Miles Carver walked in. He was holding a tablet and looking distinctly unimpressed. "Did you read it?" Miles asked, leaning against the doorframe. "I did," I said. "I assume I do not need to tell you that I never sent those texts." Miles chuckled dryly. "You don't need to tell me anything. I have eyes." He walked over and placed the tablet on my desk. He had the screenshots pulled up in a forensic image analyzer. "Your brother is many things," Miles said, "but a graphic designer is not one of them. Look at the alignment of the text bubbles. The timestamp font is Arial, but the message body is Helvetica. And if you look at the metadata," he tapped the screen. "The original file was created in a photo editing program at 3:00 this morning. He didn't even scrub the layer history. We can literally see where he pasted the text over an old conversation about potato salad. Potato salad. Apparently, you asked him to bring potato salad to a barbecue 3 years ago. That was the base image." Miles said he replaced potato salad with wire fraud. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "He is desperate. He is suicidal," Miles corrected. "He just sent fabricated evidence to the legal counsel of the company. He is trying to defraud. This is no longer just internal policy violation. This is defamation and obstruction of justice. I am adding it to the file. Does Harlan know?" "Harlan is the one who forwarded it to me," Miles said. He said, and I quote, "give him enough rope." But the email had done damage elsewhere. My phone lit up. It was Mallory. She wasn't texting. She was calling. I let it go to voicemail. She called again immediately. Then a third time I picked up. "Mallory, I am working. You have to stop him." Mallory's voice was high, thin, and bordering on hysteria. "Harper, you have to stop him. He sent that email to my parents, too. He said my dad. I saw the distribution list. I said, my dad is freaking out." Mallory sobbed. "He saw the part about the Keen invoices. He asked me what Grant meant. He asked me why our family name is on a vendor list. Harper, if my dad finds out about the LLC, if he finds out Grant used my brother's name to launder money, then he will find out the truth." I said calmly. "You don't understand," she screamed. "My dad is a retired sheriff. He doesn't do gray areas. He will turn us in. He will turn me in. Grant told me it was legal. He swore it was just a tax loophole." "Grant lied to you." "Mallory," I said, "just like he lied about the texts. Just like he lied about the I-90 project. He says you are doing this because you are jealous." She cried. "He says you are trying to wreck us. I am not the one who created a shell company in your name." I said, "You signed the papers, Mallory. You need to get a lawyer, not Grant's lawyer. Your own." "I can't." "Listen to me," I said, my voice hardening. "The audit is finished. The hearing is tomorrow. If you want to save yourself, stop protecting him. Tell your father the truth before the subpoena does." I hung up. 10 minutes later, the inevitable happened. My father called. "Harper." Richard's voice was heavy, dripping with that specific paternal disappointment that used to make me crumble. "We need to talk now. I am at work." "Richard, I am in Boise," he said. I froze. My parents never came to Boise. It was a 2-hour drive from Twin Falls. "I am at the coffee shop across the street from your building," he said. "Come down. We need to settle this as a family before it goes any further." "There is nothing to settle," I said. "Do not make me come up there," he warned. "Do not make me cause a scene in your lobby. I know where you work." I looked at Miles. He nodded slightly, indicating he would be ready. "Fine," I said. "I will meet you, but not alone. I am bringing my legal counsel." "We don't need lawyers," Richard snapped. "We need to talk like father and daughter. That relationship ended when you stole my identity to buy a car." I said, silence on the other end. 5 minutes, I said. "The Starbucks on Main." I walked down with Miles. He stayed a few tables away, visible but not intruding, a silent sentinel in a gray suit. My father was sitting at a corner table. He looked older than I remembered. His face was flushed, his hands gripping a paper cup so hard the cardboard was buckling. I sat down opposite him. I didn't take off my coat. "You look tired," he said, trying for a soft opening. "I am busy," I replied. "What do you want?" "Grant sent us the email," Richard said, leaning in. "He says you are demanding money. Harper, I know you have had a hard time. I know you feel overlooked, but blackmail, this isn't you." "You believe him?" I said flatly. "Of course you do. You believe the man who photoshopped a text message over the daughter who has never asked you for a dime." He showed me the texts. Richard insisted. "Why would he lie?" "Because he stole $42,000 from his employer," I said. "Because he embezzled money to pay for the wedding you are so proud of. He is borrowing against his future earnings." Richard hissed, slamming his hand on the table. People turned to look. He lowered his voice. "He is under pressure. He made a mistake. But you are escalating it. You are bringing in lawyers. You are freezing accounts." He looked at me with genuine anger. "The car loan," he said. "The bank called me this morning. They said the account is frozen due to a fraud alert. Do you have any idea how embarrassing that is? I have had that car for 2 years. I make the payments mostly. It is in my name, Richard." I said, "You forged my signature. That is a felony." "It was a necessity," he argued. "My credit was overextended because we helped Grant with his down payment. We needed a vehicle. You had the credit score. We are family. What is mine is yours. What is yours is ours. That is how it works." "No," I said, "that is how you work. You take from me to give to him." I reached into my bag. I pulled out the folder Johnny had given me. I placed the trust fund withdrawal slip on the table. "August 2005, I said. "The Walter Sullivan Trust. $60,000. Richard's face went white. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a sudden terrified recognition. "Where did you get that?" He whispered. "It doesn't matter," I said. "You stole my college fund. You took the money Grandpa left for me, and you gave it to Grant so he could go to prep school. You let me scrub toilets and stack books until midnight to pay for a degree that was already paid for." He stammered. "It was a reallocation. Grant needed the structure. You were always so strong. Harper, you didn't need the help." "He did." "I didn't need the help," I laughed, a harsh, jagged sound. "Or did you just not care if I drowned?" "I did what I had to do for the family," he said, his voice rising again, desperate to regain control. "And now you are going to destroy it." "For what?" "Pride money. If you go through with this hearing tomorrow, if you get him fired, he will lose everything. Mallory will leave him. He will be unhireable." "Is that what you want, to destroy your brother?" "I am not destroying him," I said. "I am just turning on the lights." "I am your father," he said, switching to a command tone. "I am ordering you to drop this. Go back to that office. Tell Mr. Boss it was a misunderstanding and withdraw the report. If I don't what I asked, you will cut me out. You already did that years ago. You will badmouth me. You already do that." I stood up. "I have the car loan fraud documented." I said, "I have the trust fund theft documented, and I have the IP logs showing that Grant used your computer in your house to spoof an email framing me for embezzlement." Richard stared at me, his mouth slightly open. "If you threaten me again," I said, leaning down so our faces were level, "or if you try to contact my employer again, I will hand every single one of these papers to the district attorney. And you won't just lose your car, you will lose your freedom." I turned and walked away. "Harper," he called after me, his voice cracking. "Harper, please. He is your brother." I didn't look back. Miles fell into step beside me as we exited the coffee shop. That, Miles said quietly, was effective. "It is not over," I said. "Grant knows the email didn't work. Richard failed. He is cornered." "What does a cornered rat do?" Miles asked. "He tries to chew through the walls," I said. We went back to the office. The day dragged on. The tension on the fourth floor was palpable. Grant's door was closed. I could see his silhouette through the frosted glass, pacing back and forth. At 5:30, most of the staff left. I stayed. Parents stayed. The IT security team stayed. We were waiting. At 6:15, the alert came. I was in the server room with the head of IT. We were watching the real-time access logs. Use a JIT. Whitman requesting access to secure drive finance archives. Access denied. He is trying to get into the backups. The IT director said he wants to delete the invoice history. User J. Whitman requesting access to user Junior's workstation. Access denied. He is trying to wipe Junior's computer remotely. I said then the escalation. User J. Whitman attempting administrative override. Password attempt 1 failed. Password attempt 2 failed. Password attempt 3 failed. He is guessing admin passwords. Miles said from the corner. He is literally hacking his own company. He thinks if he deletes the files, there is no case. I said he doesn't understand that we mirrored the drive yesterday. On the screen, a red banner flashed. System alert. Unauthorized intrusion attempt. Account locked. Session recorded. Got him. The IT director said Grant had just signed his own death warrant. He hadn't just embezzled. He had now committed corporate espionage and attempted destruction of evidence. I looked at the screen. The log was scrolling, capturing every keystroke of his panic. I pulled out my phone. I sent a text to Harland boss. Harper. He took the bait. The attempt is logged. He is locked out. Parlom. Excellent. The hearing is at 9:00. Get some sleep. I walked back to my desk to pack up. As I passed Grant's office, the door flew open. Grant stood there. He looked disheveled. His tie was loosened, his hair wild. He was staring at his phone, then at his dark computer screen. He looked up and saw me. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge at me. His eyes were wide, rimmed with red, filled with a hate so pure it was almost physical. "What did you do?" he whispered. "My password isn't working. I can't get in." "It must be a glitch," I said, my voice cool and detached. "You should probably go home, Grant. You have a big day tomorrow." "You locked me out," he hissed. "You blocked me so I couldn't fix it." "There is nothing to fix," I said. "The numbers are the numbers." "I will kill you," he said. It wasn't a scream. It was a low, trembling mumble. "I will kill you," that Miles Carver said, stepping out from the shadows of the hallway, holding his phone up, is a threat of violence against an employee. "I have recorded it, and I am calling building security to escort you off the premises." Grant looked at Miles, then back at me. He realized finally that he was outnumbered. He realized that the charm, the smile, the family failure narrative, none of it worked here. He grabbed his coat and stormed past us, shoving his shoulder into the door frame. As he exited, I watched him go. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to run after him. I didn't feel the urge to call my mother and ask how to smooth it over. I didn't worry about his feelings. I felt a profound, quiet sense of release. I had spent decades cleaning up his messes. I had paid his debts. I had hidden his secrets. I had let him shine while I stood in the dark. But tonight, he had tried to burn down the building, and I had simply handed him the matches and locked the door. I looked at Miles. "Is the file ready for tomorrow?" I asked. "It is airtight," Miles said. "Good," I said. "Let's finish this." The boardroom on the executive floor of Blue Crest was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of polished mahogany and brushed steel, dominated by a table long enough to land a small aircraft on. But the feature that mattered most this Tuesday morning was the adjoining observation deck. It was a small soundproofed room separated from the main chamber by a large pane of one-way glass. I stood in the dark of that observation room, my arms crossed, watching the stage I had set. Inside the boardroom, the tribunal was assembled. Harlan Voss sat at the head of the table, his face carved from granite. To his right was Daner Kilpatrick, the head of compliance. To his left, Miles Carver, the general counsel and the chief financial officer, a man named Henderson, who looked like he hadn't smiled since 1998. At 9:00 precisely, the double doors opened. Grant walked in. He was wearing his best suit, a charcoal three-piece that he usually reserved for board presentations. He walked with a bounce in his step, a frantic, over-caffeinated energy that tried desperately to mimic confidence. He carried a leather portfolio, doubtless filled with excuses he had stayed up all night fabricating after being locked out of the server. "Good morning, everyone," Grant said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He pulled out a chair without being invited. I assume this is about the budget discrepancies I've been trying to get into the system to clear that up. Some sort of glitch locked me out last night. Sit down, Grant, Harlan said. He didn't look up from the file in front of him. Grant sat. He looked around the table, his smile faltering slightly as he took in the stony expressions. Look, I know how this looks. The quarter was chaotic. I moved some buckets around to cover operational expedited costs. It is standard agility. We are not here to discuss agility, Daner Kilpatrick said. She pushed a stack of papers across the polished wood. We are here to discuss theft. Grant laughed. A short, nervous bark. Theft. Come on, Daner. That is a heavy word. I admitted I was creative with the client development budget, but Keen Event Logistics. Miles Carver interrupted, his voice cutting through the room like a razor. Grant froze. The color drained from his face so fast it was like someone had pulled a plug. We have the articles of incorporation, Miles continued, tapping a finger on the file. We have the wire transfers totaling $42,000, and we have the vendor approval logs authorized by your login credentials. That is a legitimate vendor. Grant stammered. They handle specialized venue scouting. We spoke to the registered agent this morning. Miles said Mallory Keene. Grant winced. We have her on the line. Miles said he pressed a button on the speakerphone in the center of the table. MS. Keene. Are you there? Mallory's voice filled the room. It was thick with tears and trembling with panic. I am here. Mallory, don't say anything. Grant shouted, half rising from his chair. Sit down. Harlan roared. It was the first time he had raised his voice, and the sound was terrifying. Grant collapsed back into his seat. M. Keene, Miles asked calmly. Can you confirm the nature of the services provided by Keen Event Logistics to Bluest Transport? I don't know, Mallory sobbed. Grant told me it was just a holding company. He said it was for tax benefits for the wedding. He said he needed an entity to process his bonus early. I didn't know he was billing the company for work we didn't do. I swear my dad is going to kill me. Thank you, MS. Keene, Miles said. He cut the connection. Grant stared at the phone. His fiancée had just disowned his narrative. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. She is confused, Grant whispered. She doesn't understand corporate finance. Do you, Henderson, the CFO, asked because from where I sit, you created a shell company to siphon $42,000 of operating capital into your personal wedding fund. That is not finance, Grant. That is embezzlement. I was going to pay it back, Grant pleaded, the veneer of confidence shattering completely. He leaned forward, his hands gripping the edge of the table. It was a loan, a temporary bridge loan. I have a bonus coming up. I was going to balance the books before the end of the fiscal year. You have to understand the pressure. The wedding costs were spiraling. We also reviewed the I-90 optimization project, Daner said, ignoring his plea. She signaled to the side door. It opened and Jonah Reyes walked in. The young analyst looked terrified, but he held his head up. He didn't look at Grant. He walked to the end of the table and stood there, clutching a folder I had helped him prepare. Jonah, Grant said, his voice cracking. Buddy, tell them. Tell them we worked on that model together. Tell them how I guided the strategy. Jonah took a deep breath. Mr. Whitman instructed me to email the raw Excel files to his personal drive. Jonah said, his voice shaking but clear. He told me that if I spoke to upper management, I would be fired. The code in the model is mine. The timestamps prove I did 140 hours of work. Mr. Whitman did 20 minutes of formatting. You little ungrateful rat. Grant hissed. I hired you. I gave you a chance. Mr. Reyes, Harlan said gently. Thank you. You may go. Jonah practically ran out of the room. Grant was sweating now. Visible beads of perspiration were rolling down his forehead. He loosened his tie. Okay, fine. I cut some corners. I took credit. Everyone does it. It is the culture you want to fire me for being ambitious. Fine. Give me a severance package and I will sign an NDA. We can all walk away clean. Harron looked at Miles. Miles smiled, a cold predatory expression. We are not quite done, Miles said. He projected an image onto the wall screen. It was the email from H. Rodriguez, Consulting net, the fake invoice attempted wire fraud. Miles read, $12,500 solicited using a spoofed domain traced to a residential IP address in Twin Falls. Grant stopped breathing. He stared at the screen, and Miles continued, clicking a remote. The screen changed to the server logs from the previous night. The red banners of access denied filled the display. Attempted destruction of evidence, Miles said. Computer trespass. Unauthorized use of administrative credentials. You tried to wipe the server. Grant, you tried to delete the logs. Grant looked around the room, his eyes wide and frantic. I didn't. That wasn't me. My account was hacked. We have video of you entering the building at 6:10 in the evening. Daner said, we have video of you leaving at 6:35, right after the intrusion attempt was blocked. This is a setup, Grant screamed. He stood up, knocking his chair over. This is her. It is Harper. She is doing this. She has been out to get me since the engagement party. She is jealous because I am the success and she is nothing. She planted this. She is the hacker. Harper Rodriguez is an independent auditor acting on the instructions of this board, Harlan said, his voice ice cold. She has conducted herself with absolute professional integrity, which is more than I can say for you. She is a snake, Grant yelled. He was pacing now, wild gestures, spit flying from his mouth. She manipulated all of you. You are going to take the word of a bitter divorced failure over your top regional manager. Former manager, Harlan corrected. Grant stopped. You are terminated. Harlan said, effective immediately for cause, gross misconduct, fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage. You can't do that, Grant whispered. We are also filing a civil suit to recover the $42,000 plus the cost of the investigation, Miles added. And regarding the identity theft of your sister and the use of your parents' computer to commit wire fraud, we are handing that file to the district attorney. Grant looked like he had been shot. The police. You tried to frame an innocent woman. Harlan said, you tried to destroy her career to cover your incompetence. We do not tolerate predators at Blue Crest. Grant stood in the center of the ruin of his life. The silence stretched out long and unbearable. He looked at Harlan. He looked at Daner. He looked at the empty chair where Jonah had stood. Then slowly he turned his head. He looked directly at the mirror. He couldn't see me. I knew that the glass was reflective on his side. He only saw his own terrified, sweating face, but he knew. He knew I was there. He knew I had watched every second of it. His expression shifted. The fear remained. But underneath it, a deep, burning hatred curdled his features. He didn't look like my brother. He looked like a trapped animal realizing the cage was locked. Harper, he mouthed. He didn't say it out loud. He just formed the shape of my mane. Security is waiting outside, Harlan said. They will escort you to your car. Do not return to this building. Grant stared at the mirror for 1 second longer. Then he turned and walked out. He didn't take his leather portfolio. He walked with a slow. The bounce gone. The energy extinguished. I let out a long breath. My hands were gripping the arms of my chair so hard my knuckles were white. It was done. I walked out of the observation room and entered the boardroom. Karen looked up. Are you all right? I am fine, I said. My voice was steady. We will proceed with the filings this afternoon. Miles said the police report will be submitted by 5. Thank you, I said, for handling it cleanly. He did it to himself, Daner said, gathering the files. I have never seen someone self-destruct so completely. I left the building shortly after. The winter sun was blindingly bright on the snow, a stark contrast to the gloom of the boardroom. My phone buzzed. I expected a hateful text from Grant or a screaming voicemail from my mother. Instead, it was a message from Aunt Joni. Joni, they are all coming to my house tonight. Richard, Colleen, Grant, Mallory, they want to hold a war council. I told them they could come, but only if we put everything on the table. No more secrets. I want you to come. Harper, please. Let's finish this. I stared at the screen. A family dinner, the traditional setting for all our dysfunctions. Usually, I would avoid it. I would hide in my house and let them spin their stories. I would let them paint me as the villain while I nursed my wounds in silence. But not today. Today, I had the truth in a briefcase. Today, I had the backing of $1 billion corporation and the law. Today, I wasn't the failure. I typed back, Harper, what time? Joan. 7. Harper, I will be there. I got into my car. I didn't go home. I drove to the lawyer's office I had hired the day before. I needed to pick up one last document. Grant thought he had lost because of a glitch. He thought he had lost because of bad luck. Tonight, I was going to show him and my parents exactly why they had lost. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to restructure the family dynamic, and this time there would be no golden parachute for the liability. The driveway of my Aunt Joni's house was covered in a thin sheet of fresh ice. It was 7:00 in the evening. The windows of the small single-story home glowed with a warm, deceptive yellow light. From the street, it looked like a postcard of suburban domesticity. Inside, I knew it was a courtroom. I parked my car next to my father's SUV, the one I was legally paying for, but had never driven. I took a moment to check my reflection in the rear-view mirror. I did not look like the woman who had stood in the corner of the snow glass lodge a few days ago, holding a glass of water and hoping to be invisible. I looked sharp. I looked ready. I walked up the path and opened the door without knocking. The living room was crowded. My parents, Richard and Colleen, were sitting on the floral sofa, their posture stiff and defensive. Grant sat in the armchair in the corner. He looked awful. The arrogance that usually defined his features had dissolved, leaving behind a pale, sweating face and eyes that darted around the room like a trapped animal. Mallory sat on a wooden chair near him, but not next to him. She was crying silently, twisting a tissue in her hands. Aunt Joni stood by the fireplace. She looked terrified, but she was standing straight. Harper is here, Joni said. Her voice wavered, but she didn't retreat. We can start. This is ridiculous, my father snapped, standing up. We do not need an intervention. Grant made a mistake at work. We need to figure out how to spin it, not sit around pointing fingers. Sit down, Richard. Joni said it was the first time in 40 years I had ever heard her give him an order. He was so shocked he actually sat. No one is spinning anything tonight, Joni continued. Tonight we tell the truth. She walked over to the coffee table and placed the manila envelope in the center. Harper knows about the trust fund, Joni said. My mother gasped. She looked at Joni with pure venom. You promised. You swore on Mom's grave. I swore to protect the family, Joni said. But you didn't protect the family. Colleen, you cannibalized one child to feed the other. Joni opened the envelope and spread the documents out. The withdrawal slip from 2005, the transfer order signed by my father. Walter left that money for all the grandchildren, Joni said, looking at Grant. $60,000 of Harper's share. You took it when she was 19. You let her work 2 jobs. You let her take out loans she is still paying interest on. And you gave it to Grant for a prep school he barely graduated from. Grant stared at the floor. He didn't deny it. He knew. He had always known. We did what was necessary, my father said, his voice rising in that familiar bullying cadence. Grant needed the environment. He is sensitive. He needed the connections. Harper is tough. Look at her. She made it, didn't she? She is successful. It made her stronger. It didn't make me stronger. Richard, I said, stepping further into the room. It made me tired. I walked to the table and placed my own folder on top of Joni's papers. And the car? I asked. Was that to make me stronger too? I looked at Mallory. My parents are driving a $48,000 SUV. It is registered in my name. They forged my signature to get the loan because their credit was shot from bailing Grant out of his last disaster. I found out yesterday. Mallory looked up, her eyes wide with horror. You stole her identity. It is not stealing. My mother cried. It is family resources. We are one unit. When Grant gets his big promotion, he was going to pay it all off. We were just bridging the gap. There is no promotion, Mom. Grant whispered. Of course there is, she insisted, reaching out to him. It is just a misunderstanding. We will call Mr. Us. We will explain. Harper can explain. She is the consultant. She can fix the paperwork. I cannot fix it, I said. Because I am the one who reported him." The silence that followed was absolute. My mother looked at me as if I had pulled a knife and stabbed Grant in the chest. "You," she whispered. "You reported your own brother." "I reported a fraud," I said. "I reported fee 2,000 through a shell company. I reported the theft of an employee's intellectual property, and I reported the attempted framing of an external auditor." "You selfish, jealous little—" My father lunged toward me, his face purple with rage. The front door opened behind me. 2 men stepped into the hallway. The cold air swirled around them, carrying the scent of winter and expansive wool. It was Harlan Voss and Miles Carver. My father froze. He recognized the power in the room immediately. Harlan Voss didn't just look like a CEO. He looked like a judgment. "Mr. Boss," Grant croaked. He tried to stand up, but his legs seemed to fail him. "Sit," Harlan said. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that crushed the air in the room. Harlan walked past me and stood before the coffee table. He looked down at the papers Joni had spread out. He looked at the withdrawal slip from the Walter Sullivan Trust. "Walter Sullivan was a man of honor," Harren said softly. He looked at my father. "I knew him. He sat on the board of the community chest with me 30 years ago. He talked about his legacy. He wanted his grandchildren to have a fair start." Harren picked up the paper. "You stole that from him," Harlan said to Richard. "And you stole it from her." "This is a private family matter," Richard stammered, his bluster evaporating. "You have no right to be in this house." "I have every right," Harlan said, "because yesterday evening a computer registered to this address was used to attempt a federal wire fraud against my company. That brings your house into my jurisdiction." Miles Carver stepped forward. He held a legal document in his hand. "Grant Whitman," Miles said, his tone professional and bored, "you are hereby served with a formal notice of termination for cause from Bluecrest Transport. We are also serving you with a civil lawsuit for the recovery of $42,000 in embezzled funds, plus legal fees and investigative costs." He handed the papers to Grant. Grant didn't take them. They fell into his lap. "Furthermore," Miles continued, turning to Mallory, "we have named Keen Event Logistics LLC as a co-defendant since you are the registered agent MS. Keen, you will need to retain counsel. We will be subpoenaing your bank records to trace the flow of funds." Mallory let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. "No, my dad is a sheriff. You can't involve my family. I didn't know Grant told me it was legal." She turned on Grant, hitting him on the chest with her fists. "You liar. You told me it was a bonus. You told me you were handling it. You destroyed my family." Grant tried to push her away. "Oh, stop. Please, I can fix it." "You can't fix anything," she screamed. She grabbed her purse and ran for the door. She didn't look back. The engagement ring was still on her finger, but I knew it wouldn't be by morning. "Grant is not the only one in trouble," Miles said, looking at my parents. "We have handed the IP logs regarding the spoofed email and the identity theft to the district attorney. They are very interested in how a car loan was opened with a forged signature." My mother started to cry, a loud wailing sound. "Please, please don't take him to jail. He is a good boy. He just made a mistake. He is 33 years old." "Colleen," I said, "he is not a boy. Harper, help us." My father begged, switching tactics instantly. He looked old and pathetic. "Talk to them. You are the consultant. Tell them we can work out a payment plan. Don't let them ruin our name. We are your parents." I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me to be utility, a tool to be used and discarded. I felt a strange sense of calm. The anger was gone. The hurt was gone. There was just clarity. "I have already spoken to the police," I said. "I filed the affidavit for identity theft this morning. The car is no longer my problem. It is evidence." "You would send your father to prison," Richard whispered. "You were willing to send me to prison to cover Grant's theft," I said. "You let him use your computer to frame me. You didn't care if I lost my career. You didn't care if I lost my freedom. You only cared that Grant didn't get caught." I turned to Harren. "Is there anything else, Mr. Us?" "No," Harren said. He looked at Grant, who was slumped in the chair, weeping into his hands. "Grant wasn't sabotaged, Mr. Whitman, he was recorded. Every keystroke, every lie. He built his own cage. Harlem turned to me. I will wait in the car. Harper. He and Miles left. The door closed, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. Brant looked up. His eyes were red and swollen. Harper, he said. His voice was a rasp. Harper, please. I am your brother. I have nothing. Mallory is gone. The job is gone. Please, just tell them you made a mistake on the report. Save me one last time, please. I looked at him. I remembered the little boy I used to pull around in a wagon. I remembered the teenager who laughed when I had to wear thrift store clothes because he needed the new uniform. I remembered the man who stood in the snow glass lodge and introduced me as a failure. I am not saving you, Grat. I said, why? He cried. Why do you hate me? I don't hate you. I said, I just don't owe you anything. Not my money, not my credit score, and certainly not my integrity. I looked at my parents. I am freezing my credit permanently. I said I am petitioning the court to reclaim the trust fund money from your assets, and I am changing my phone number. Do not come to my office. Do not come to my house. You are walking away. My mother sobbed. From your family. I am walking away from the transaction. I said. I turned to Aunt Joni. She was crying, but she was smiling just a little. Thank you, Joni, I said, for the truth. Go, Joni whispered. Be free. I walked out of the house. The cold night air hit me, filling my lungs with a sharp, clean chill. The snow was falling softly, covering the dirty slush of the road, making everything new again. Harlem was waiting by his SUV. The engine was running. You handled that well, he said as I approached. I handled it, I said. He handed me a folder. The new contract, senior strategic advisor for the parent company, direct report to me, no family discounts, full market rate. I took the folder and the compliance clause, strict adherence to the truth, he said, no exceptions. I can work with that, I said. I looked back at the house one last time. I could see the shadows moving in the window, the silhouette of my father pacing, my mother weeping, but the sound couldn't reach me anymore. The glass was thick, and I was on the outside. I wasn't a failure. I wasn't a savior. I was Harper Rodriguez. And for the first time in my life, the ledger was balanced. I got into my car and drove away, leaving the debt behind in the snow. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you're tuning in from. Are you listening on your commute, at work, or maybe unwinding at home? Please let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed this journey of justice, please make sure to subscribe to the Azad Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that like button so we can share this story with even more people. Until next time, stay sharp and know your worth. Thanks to you.